We're waiting. And I think we're live. Hey, hi everybody. I'm Rand Hoppy. I am the executive director of the Jack Kirby Museum. And
I'm Tom Kraft, the president of the Jack Kirby Museum. And we're with...
And my name is Mike Royer, and I'm a friend of these two guys.
That's right. So we're on, I don't know, how many have we done? Is it 4, 5, 6?
Well,
today?
Well, I've done one with you. Or is it two?
We've done 3.5 so far. Because
3.5, because James.
Oh, you're talking about so far in this presentation.
Today.
Okay.
Yeah. So
this is my first one.
Yeah. So we're here celebrating Jack Kirby's, what would have been Jack Kirby's 103rd birthday. Our event is called 3 Days for 103. And it's...
What's the hashtag?
The hashtag is Kirby 103. And,
how original.
I know, but you got to make it simple. So we are broadcasting.
I like it.
We're broadcasting out to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter / Periscope live all at the same time, and we are able to see your comments. So if you would like to say hello, ask some questions, make some comments, we'll do the best we can to respond, or whatever. But feel free. We'd love to hear from you, even if, like I say, if you're just saying hello. And
we've also had a lot of practice in ignoring.
That's true. It can happen. So I know this is like a professional moment for you. So can you talk about this particular piece?
This particular piece was for me a baptism of fire. For many moons, whenever we were fortunate as fans of Jack Kirby to see his pencil work reproduced in a fanzine, I would always remark, why isn't anyone inking Jack? And one night I answered the phone about 5 o'clock and I went, hello. And this voice said, Mike Royer, this is Jack Kirby. Alex Toth says you're a pretty good inker. My first thought was, who's pulling my lanyard here?
That's right.
But not many people would have used Alex Toth's name in the introduction, because he recommended me to Jack.
Mm.
And so he asked me if I'd like to come out to his house tomorrow. He was living temporarily in Irvine, and he'd like to see how I inked. So when I got there, he showed me this piece. It was for Marvel Mania, for a biography in one of their publications. Yep. And I said, sure. I said, I'll have it for you tomorrow. And he said, well, why don't you just sit right here and do it? And I thought, no, right here at the fabled Jack Kirby drawing board.
Right.
Well, fortunately, because I had been working a lot with Russ Manning, I had a shoebox with all of my tools, inks, bowl for water, erasers, razor blades, so on. And I said, well, I got my tools in the car. Let's do it. And when I say baptism of fire, it's because it seemed like every 20 minutes, Jack would come in and look over my shoulder and see how I was doing. We took a break. We took a break, and Roz made us homemade sandwiches, and I met 2 of the 3 kids. Then I went back and finished the page, and Mark Evanair pointed out to me many years later that what Jack was doing was finding out if it was all coming from my hand. He didn't want to take a chance that I'd go home and then have some ghost do it for me.
Yeah.
And he wanted to see how I worked under pressure. And I guess I worked out okay, because after I left that day, I felt like I was part of the extended Kirby family. Yeah. That's how they made you feel. I would hate to see what it was like if they didn't like you. I don't imagine there were too many people that they didn't hit it off with. They were such great people.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I said yesterday or the day before on Lisa's posting on Facebook about her dad's birthday that we're all of us richer for having experienced his work, his talent, and for those of us who were fortunate enough to know him.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, it's like sitting at the kitchen table at the Kirby home in Thousand Oaks and eating Roz's homemade chocolate cake, sipping on a glass of milk, and discussing old Warner Brothers movies. In my mind, Jack was Warner Brothers movies on the printed page. If you understand at all the dichotomy of the motion picture industry way back in its golden age, MGM was at the top, and they had casts of thousands and so much gloss that the screen just literally glowed. And at the bottom were the Poverty Row Studios, Mascot, Republic, which was the best of the Poverty Row Studios. And in the middle, in my opinion, was Warner Brothers. And when people would ask me if I could explain the difference between Joe Sennett and Mike Royer on inking Jack Kirby, I found the explanation that makes the most sense to me is that Joe Sennett inked Jack Kirby, MGM. I inked Jack Kirby, Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers and Jack Kirby put on the screen / the page all that was necessary to tell the story and nothing more.
Right.
And MGM put everything on the screen. And I'm not knocking that, you know.
Right.
If people were to ask me who was my all-time favorite comic book inker, I would say Joe Sennett.
Yeah.
But if they want to know who I thought was the best inker on Jack, how do I say this and sound like I'm not tooting my own horn? But I think I was the truest to Jack.
You were the truest, without a doubt. Yeah.
And it's whether people wanted to see true or not, it's a whole different story.
That's right. Yeah.
For another interview. The 206th anniversary.
Yeah.
This is the first double-page spread that I inked. This was for New Gods number 5.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed inking the first page because it was simply Metron in his chair over a photo montage that Jack put together.
Right.
And so it was nice making a page rates inking for one little figure.
True.
But then it was all made up for in this 2-page spread with detail in it that I did not want to leave out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody once, I think it was Eric Larson on one of the Facebook groups on Kirby, mentioned that I seem to understand when to make the blacks totally solid and when to leave them open. I think I grew up a Jack Kirby fan, even though I didn't know who Jack was until probably the 1960s.
Right.
But as a kid, starting about age 9, I became a voracious comic book reader and lived in the country until I was almost 11 years old. And a mile down the road was a mom and pop trading post.
Yep.
And I'd go down there and for a nickel get these golden age comic books with no covers on them. And so I got to see stuff like The Boy Commandos and Newsboy Legion and those kinds of things that weren't being published when I was looking at comic books.
Yeah.
And of course, I read everything. I made no distinction about any genre being better than the rest. If Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, Donald Duck, Crime and Punishment, Daredevil, and I loved the Simon Kirby Westerns and the other books that they produced out of their studio. And I was able to, in my own mind, tell which stories had been penciled and inked from the same hand.
Right.
And it always, as I found out later, was Jack.
Yeah.
About as pure as you could get from a studio-produced book. Which is why I asked that question years later, why is no one inking Jack?
Right.
What do you think about the way that Jack inked himself and also the way Joe inked him? Was Jack inking? Jack must have been inking.
There's something about some of the brushwork that Jack did that is just, to me, you can't duplicate it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. It's just something, when I look at it, it's like, God, this is so natural. You know, and I like to think that by the time I started inking for Jack, and that was, you know, a bunch of stuff for Marvel Mania, the Marine Toys for Tots programs. I think some of his God's drawings.
All right.
Right.
I was working with him a year before doing any of the comic book stuff.
Yeah.
And I think Jack's first reaction probably to my inking on his pencils was the fact that it came from my hand and I worked under pressure. He gradually began to see, and I think I have to thank Mark and Steve for pointing out to Jack, because Jack never paid that much attention to the printed books, which is why Coletta got away with so much.
Right.
So much.
Yes.
I think he came to realize that I was really into finishing his pencils in ink, not just inking them, but completing the statement.
Yeah.
And you may agree or disagree, listeners, viewers, but that was my intent. And, recently there's been a discussion about Wally Wood's inking of Jack. He did a fantastic job. As a kid, I just fell in love with Spy Masters comic strip.
Yep.
And the minute that Wally left and Dick Ayers started inking, it just wasn't the same anymore.
Right.
And Wally Wood, the incredible talent he was, no matter who he inked, it looked like Wally had drawn it.
Yeah.
And I know at the time, somebody asked Jack who his favorite inker was, and I think he responded, Wally Wood.
Huh.
But that's before that green kid from Oregon came on.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Roz used to tease me when the first issues of the Fourth World books came out. She said, Mike, we're getting all these letters and people are saying, who the hell is this Mike Royer guy? Where's Vinny?
All right.
And I think that was the reaction because the age group that these books appealed to and Jack's work appealed to, they had never seen pure Jack. Because even when you go back to the mid-'60s and all those crazy alien and monster things, they're seeing Jack through Dick Ayers' eyes.
Right.
I don't know if Chick Stone inked anything back then, but I know Ayers inked a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I don't wish to denigrate anyone that's ever inked Jack, at least publicly. And cue the laugh track. A lot of people, as I have observed, consider the Pact probably the greatest of the New Gods books.
Yeah. It is a favorite. Yeah.
It's hard for me to say. When people ask me what was your favorite book, I'd have to sit down with some of the bound volumes or trade paperbacks and go through it page by page to try to remember something about what it was like, because to keep up with Jack and the quality that I felt the work deserved, I had to ink 3 pages a day. And before that, I had to letter a complete 22-page book in 2 days, including circling balloons, ruling borders, or leaving borders out whenever I felt it would work better with white on the page. So the nuts and bolts, like I say, it's hard for me to recall.
Yeah.
Now you can show me a page and I might say, oh, God, I remember how cool it was inking the bushes behind on that page, that splash page from the Pact.
Oh, the Pact, yeah, the bushes.
And I'm making
it
to give it the same feeling that Jack did in the pencils. It's almost like soft cauliflower.
Yeah, yeah.
But it works because it's Jack. I think if I had tried to ink it like maybe I would have been inking Russ Manning, it wouldn't have worked. I think an inker's job is to be faithful to the penciler's intent. And I remember when Russ Manning left the Tarzan comic books, the editor there asked me if I would please ink Paul Norris as if I were inking Russ Manning.
Oh.
After a couple of issues, I couldn't do it anymore because I felt, excuse the bad language or the choice of words, but I felt like an abortionist.
Yeah.
So when I inked Paul Norris, I inked it as if this is how Paul would have inked it.
Right.
And Paul Norris was once asked if he'd ever had an assistant. And he said, no. The closest I ever came to having what I would call an assistant was when Mike Royer inked my pages for Gold Key comic books.
Wow.
So that's always been my mindset. When I inked Doug Wildey, I wanted to look like Doug Wildey.
Yeah.
When I inked Mel Kiefer, I wanted to be Mel Kiefer. Hy Mankin, who was the inspiration for Brenda Starr's boyfriend with the eye patch. When I inked Hy Mankin, I did my best to make it look like Hy's work.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And which is why it was so natural to me to say, why isn't anybody ever inking Jack?
Yeah.
Ramona Fraden once paid me, I thought, a very nice compliment. The only time I ever inked her was a Plastic Man book. And it's another penciler I guess I had an affinity for because I inked 5 pages a day.
Oh, wow.
I circled the blacks and my wife sat at another drawing board and she filled in the blacks,
Okay.
bless her heart.
Yeah.
Because it was to fill in between Kirby things, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But when I met her at a Comic-Con in San Diego one year, she said that of all the people that have ever inked her work, I was the only person that ever inked Ramona Fraden.
Wow.
Wow. And she said if I were still doing Brenda Starr, I'd want you inking me. I didn't have heart to tell her that I'd ever want to ink again in my life. But
Right.
No,
So
I'm being facetious.
All right.
I can't help it. It's my upbringing. I was raised in an area where it rained 80% of the time.
Yeah. So this is one of those examples of DC doing.
Oh,
right?
this book is a marvel of what Jack Kirby can do as a powerful storyteller.
Yes.
Pull that book out and look at it. Orion has his leg trapped inside a big clam.
He does.
And it changes from page to page from his right leg to his left leg.
It's true.
But you know what? You don't really give a damn.
Doesn't matter.
Because it's the power and the strength of what the storytelling, what is dialogue, the design of the work.
Yeah.
The only other artist I ever recall doing that and getting away with it was a Joe Orlando story about ancient Rome that was in an EC comic book.
Yeah.
In the New Trend comics, where he's got this Roman senator walking with a crutch. And on the same page, he changes legs that are bandaged up.
Oh, here's
these things, you know, Jack Kirby, of all the people I've ever tried to emulate my own pencils or have inked, the 2 best guys for doing water, Vern Hogarth and Jack Kirby.
Yeah, some great water.
If you look at the fire and water people sequence in the Tarzan Sundays that Vern Hogarth drew, there's some water stuff in there that is just mind-blowing. And Jack could do it just as well.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of a luncheon I had once with Roz, Jack, Vern Hogarth, and myself.
Yes.
The 2 masters of dynamic storytelling. And for 90 minutes, Roz and I sat there and rolled our eyes to the ceiling and grinned at each other while these 2 giants argued. But they were both saying the same thing. Jack Kirby, the New York kids, you know,
straight
from the slums or whatever,
Yeah.
And erudite,
that's right,
$500 word, Vern Hogarth from the penthouse uptown.
Yeah.
Both talking about their feeling about powerful storytelling, but arguing as if they were talking about different things.
Yeah.
But it was the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to have a recording of that.
Yeah, that would have been a great one. Oh, Turpin. I love the Turpin story. Yeah. Very nice.
You know, there's a couple of people who don't care for my display lettering on the Kirby books. And I tried to explain it to one of them once that if you're lettering 22 pages in 2 days and 3
Yeah.
pages have display lettering on them, you can't spend a whole day
No.
finding and designing a typeface that's perfect. And to my sort of ego, I'm pleased to learn more than one person and people of talent have told me that some of the most famous graffiti artists have patterned their lettering after my display lettering in Jack Kirby comic books.
Yep, that is true. Yep.
So somebody likes it.
Yeah, people
Yes, somebody
definitely
does.
Even
And I like it.
Even if it's on the side of a building or a railroad car in the yard somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they had they sketched it out in their book, and then they took their spray cans and went and did a Mike Royer on the side of a train. We're looking at these guys again.
So many concepts that Jack was denied the opportunity to really develop and run with. Now, this is an interesting, your choice of 2 pieces here on this slide. Because when I talk with people about storytelling and they think, oh, you mean you go from this panel to the next panel down to this one? No, that's not what I mean. I mean, there is something in that first panel that makes you go into the next panel exactly where the artist wanted you to go.
Yeah.
And then it will dump you back down to the next page or panel. And I'm looking at these 2 pages on the screen here, and you'd swear they were designed at the same time.
Yeah.
I just love the flow of these things.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, here comes Mike.
Someone once wrote a critical letter either to the Kirbys or it might have been published somewhere. They said, all this guy Royer does is just trace the pencils.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's one book of all the Kirby books that I inked that I did simply just trace the pencils. Some construction lines and everything.
Wow.
I just did it because I want to see how this looks if I really did just trace the pencils.
Wow.
It's Commandy number 2.
Huh.
Yeah, I noticed the difference.
It's a little different.
Yeah.
Because
it's more open blacks too.
It used to annoy me and hurt my feelings. No, when someone would say, "Oh, I just traced the pencils."
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you've got the IDW book,
pencils and inks.
On the left page are the pencils, and on the right are the inks. Or depending on where you're standing, it could be the other way around. But you'll notice that if that's just tracing, then I don't know what tracing means.
Yeah, I don't either. That's not fair.
I'm pretty proud of what I did for Jack.
So, Mike,
the only stuff that I'm not that proud of are some of the backgrounds in Devil Dinosaur.
Oh, really?
Well, because Jack's foliage and trees and ferns and fronds and was so distinctively Jack. And his black areas were almost ethereal. You had to make decisions. And it just went faster if I inked those backgrounds with what then was a great tool, the Le Pen by Mari.
Oh my, yes, the Le Pen.
Yeah, I remember
Le Pen was great. I
Yeah.
used to do all my concepts for Disney with Le Pen and fax them in. And so 10 years later, the line is a light purple.
Yep.
So now there are collectors who have Demon Dinosaur pages that some of the backgrounds have turned a
that's
little
too bad.
purple rather than black.
Yeah.
But if I tried to do it with the brush and the pen, I just didn't like the way it turned out. And also, it took a lot longer.
Right.
So I'm not proud of those pages only because in my mind, I cheated.
Right.
Now, I remember when I finally or ultimately wound up doing some more inking in comic books. When I left Disney in California and moved back home to Oregon, Steve Root asked me if I'd like to ink his 4-part Thor Godstorm book. And it had been so long since I'd inked anything that the papers, the brushes, the pens, the inks none of it was comfortable for me anymore.
Oh, wow.
But I discovered the Micron, the Niji stylist.
Ah, yes.
And I thought, but I can't tell anybody what I'm doing because I'm cheating. And then in the second or third issue of tomorrow's Draw, there was a tutorial by Dick Giordano extolling the virtues of the microns. And I went, I'm not cheating.
Hooray!
If I happen to complain sometimes about the tools just aren't working for me anymore.
Yeah.
My wife has this comment she uses that I guess it's her grand leveler. When I say, they're just not working for me anymore, she says, well, it's because you're old.
Oh, man. Thanks, honey.
Now I'm working on at the moment a recreation for another artist, and rather than slavishly try to reproduce the way the inking was done on what he recreated, I'm simply inking what he penciled.
Oh.
And I guess it's my interpretation of recreation is to be an exact forgery. But a recreation could also have all kinds of differences.
Yeah.
Because I recently, it seems like yesterday, probably 3 years ago, I did a recreation of Demon cover number 1,
Mm-hmm.
which I had a Xerox of the original cover as Jack drew it before they chopped 1.5 inches of artwork off the bottom to put across the top Kirby's back or Kirby's here.
Yeah.
And they put that round circle touting what the story was about. So I had done a recreation way back and did the lettering that had been designed for the cover for a collector. And somebody asked me, would I do another one? I said, if you don't mind, if I tweak a few things. Because to me, it was always obvious that the cover for Demon 1 was drawn before Jack did the interior.
Mm-hmm.
So the Demon on the cover recreation that I just did, the characters in the background are a little sharper inked. And the Demon has the cape he has on in the interior in the book.
Okay.
And his face is really a demon, in my humble opinion.
That's cool.
You know, I vaguely remember working on these things, but what I remember is a quote that I used to myself all the time. Yes, some guys do sit at the drawing board and talk to themselves, folks. The first thing I say when I open New Gods number 5 from the package that came from Jack, I said, don't screw this up, Mike.
Jeez.
And I think that was the mantra I used with every page
Yeah.
that was on the drawing board in front of me. Don't screw this up.
What a spread this is. Incredible.
Now, I did a recreation of this for
me.
Your partner in crime here, for Tom.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
And believe me, when I inked this for Jack, I inked this and another page in one day.
Right.
Wow.
It took me 2 or 3 days to do this for Tom
Yeah.
because I wanted it to be as close to the original.
Yeah.
But the original was done spontaneously with in mind that it has to be true to Jack. And in a recreation, I wanted it to be as exact, and that kind of takes care of being spontaneous.
Yeah.
I learned to be a master forger years ago.
Didn't you tell me at one point, Mike?
And there was a time at Disney in the 1980s that they made a deal with the Circle Galleries. Might have been early 80s, I don't know. Where they were selling these limited edition silkscreen seriographs of classic Disney movie one sheets, mostly for shorts.
Right.
Now, the technology didn't exist back then for them to take what may have been the only thing they had in their archives, a color copy of that poster, and probably an 8x10 glossy still.
Yeah.
They didn't have the original black and white art. So there were at least 6 of those posters that the Circle Galleries sold that are exact forgeries done by yours truly, including on the Goofy and Wilbur cartoon, since these are supposed to be reproductions of the actual one sheets. I even reproduced the printer's error
Nice.
on
That's
one
great.
line.
That's great.
Now, if there's going to be people that will get all upset that they might have bought a forgery, what difference does it make? The silkscreen serigraph wasn't real, except it being a silkscreen serigraph.
Right.
So, Mike,
I'm glad. Go back to that demon, Phantom of the Opera. This was something that I took upon myself to do with Jack sometimes if there was a lot of copy, a lot of dialogue. And it was something that I was influenced by Milton Caniff, who created Terror and the Pirates and did Steve Canyon. Because it always drove me nuts that Caniff was such a great writer, but he would have these balloons with this huge block of lettering in them.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, reading dialogue on a comic strip or a comic book page should be like reading a movie script. Now, I'm imagining if they were written this way. I haven't looked at a script in decades. Okay, that's how you take care of that. You say hello and goodbye at the same time. In the script might have said, Etrigan must know all, in parentheses, beat. When I step out upon that stage, beat.
Yeah.
Let the past return. To me, it's emphasis. There is a pause, and by break, Jack had written that all in one horizontal block.
Oh, right. Sure.
And it did not affect the art. I don't think it had any effect on the composition of the art. And to me, I wanted it to read like the guy was actually thinking these thoughts.
Yeah.
On my latest version of the Demon, the recreation, the cape is correct.
Right.
And there's a little sharper detail on these characters. There's art behind that. And lettering is solid black, as I recall. And it has his heading, which is Gone, the form of man,
right.
Enter Etrigan. And the little stamp said, another fourth world shocker.
That it did, yeah.
So we know that Jack originally intended it to be part of the fourth world. Am I talking too much?
All is well.
That happens when you spend a lot of time at home alone at the drawing board,
Yeah. Yeah.
You stop strangers on the street and go, "Did you hear about?" Oh,
that's right.
And Mike, you inked every single issue of the Demon, right?
What was that? Every issue? Yeah. Yes. Oh, I love it. They could reprint that forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know this is rat-baggish for me to say, but I don't like splitting the inking royalties with anybody else.
That's a great.
I get royalties that DC breaks them down. I haven't got a bad thing to say about DC and how they pay for reprints. Not one bad thing. They are fantastic. If I know who to call and talk to, I would say thank you, bless you, and they itemize everything, and it's like such and such. 68 cents. I mean,
hopefully it's more than that.
And then there's one that's $179, and under it is 27 cents.
Yeah.
$1.10. I love it. It's like one of my best buddies, my metaphorical big brother, who still gets residual checks from all of his years in television and movies. And he says sometimes it costs him more to write the check than the amount.
Yeah.
And you did the first part of Commandy up to issue, I think, 16. And then you came back at the end, right?
Yeah, number 2 is got the insides that I literally traced the pencils.
Mm-hmm.
Let me add this, though. If I felt the line should have some thick and thin to it, it's there.
All right.
Yeah.
But basically, it's... And once it was colored, it didn't look too bad.
I thought it looks good in black and white and original art.
Well, it was still pure Kirby.
Yeah.
Really pure.
Yeah.
I really do remember enjoying inking his fur.
Oh, yeah.
These fur pelts.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's fun seeing this stuff in black and white.
Oh, cool.
You see, my deal with Jack was this: he kept the original art.
Uh-huh. Right.
Mm-hmm.
He did give me a few pages of one of the Captain Americas.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I didn't think I was a fool. In retrospect, I go, what a fool you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
I gave those pages away to friends.
Right.
Wow.
Because I was so damn close to the work, I didn't want something I'd inked. I wanted something that Giacoya had inked.
Yeah.
Or Sinnott.
Yep.
You know. I'd kill to have one of those Captain America pages with the red skull on it.
Oh, yeah.
As a Jack Kirby fan, I have to say I was excited that I was going to get to ink 2 or 3 Captain Americas. Was it 3 or was it more? And also to be able to ink the Red Skull.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the classic Kirby villains.
Yeah.
You know. Yes, that's... go back to Charlie Chan.
Oh, okay.
This is another recreation for your partner in crime there, Mr. Tom Kraft. And it is a recreation, sort of the cover of one of the Simon and Kirby Charlie Chans.
Right.
The display lettering is from the syndicated Sunday comic strip. And the head is from the Andreola head that was part of that title box on the Sunday pages back in the late 30s, which I just felt worked better.
Right.
Yeah, I remember you asked me if you could change it, and I said, do what you want to do. Who am I to say what Mike Breuer should ink?
If you compare that to the comic book cover, you'll see that there's a great deal of difference in the title.
Actually, let me, I think I might be able to get that.
But I only did that because I am a fan of the Charlie Chan movies.
Right.
Even though, as many Asians have said who have never seen the films, they objected to his yellow makeup and his wooden false teeth. It's funny. 41 of them, and I don't ever remember seeing that in a one of them. Don't get me on my soapbox. Do we have any questions, or do we even have an audience?
We do. We've got.
Are you out there, folks?
We've got 38 people eyeballing us right now.
How many?
38.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah, and we do have a few comment. We have quite a few comments. Everybody's really happy to see you, and Barry Ira Geller says hello.
Hey, my statues have never arrived yet.
And what else we got?
With Barry, you inked Lord of Light, the architectural science fiction land drawings, right?
Oh, I should do a plug for Lord of Light.
Sure.
In my opinion, and of Barry's and a few other people, it's some of the finest work that Jack Kirby ever did.
That's right.
It is not comic books. It's a different kind of storytelling. It is showing Jack Kirby as a master architectural artist who created things that when you look at them and start dissecting them, it's like Dr. Frankenstein says, it could work. And it worked well enough to convince the Iranians that these were sets for a movie.
Yeah,
so I guess I have an Argo connection, huh?
Yeah, you do. Hey, Mike, one of our audience members is asking about the Cruisin' covers. You did the covers for those record albums, the Cruisin' series. Wasn't that your project? No.
Do you have a question for me, or are you soliciting a question?
Well, the question was, you did do that, right? That was you, on the Cruisin' album covers.
Oh, the album covers, yeah.
Yeah.
The first half of the covers were designed by an artist who apparently was in a house at the record company, or was a regular contributor, and he did little 4-inch square thumbnails for me, and I went out and did all the research, found the magazine covers, the jukeboxes, the dashboards of 1958 Chevrolets, that sort of thing, and corrected perspective problems and so on. And then this designer, when they would talk about his covers at parties he was at, would say, "Oh yeah, and these were inked for me by Mike Royer."
Oh man.
So when the guy that owned the rights to the albums decided to do another set, he said, "Do you want to get the other guy involved?" And I said, "Are you kidding? I'll write them."
We have a question here.
All the Cruisin' albums are my art.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple that I don't think were ever even printed.
Oh,
interesting. And most people have not seen the different covers that were done for the packaging of several CDs for the big box stores.
Oh, okay.
And they all tell a story. They start in 1954 and go through 1973.
Yeah. So
we have some questions.
I've got one here. Just give me a moment. Let me.
So one person's asking about the pages.
Oh, well, okay. I see the question. The question is, can Mike talk about how he had to use an iron on inking the pages from Jack Kirby? Jack had the greatest paper in the world for penciling on with a 2B or an HB pencil. It was just perfect. Right. If you inked it, you had to wash your hands 3 times a day. But it was perfect for penciling. But it was hell for inking. Because if you used a pen or your ink was diluted just a little bit, it would bleed all over the place. So the only way I could get the paper tight enough, hard enough, that I could work with the pen on it, and especially for the lettering, was to take my wife's iron and iron the pages. I think in those first few years, I probably ruined 3 irons.
Wow.
Ironing those pages. But it was the only way that I could get them to take the ink and not bleed.
Was that all his stuff, or just like his later Marvel stuff? Was it like his DC stuff you had ironed as well?
It only lasted on the early DC books. At one time, I convinced him to try another paper, which was great for me to ink on, but it was not what Jack was comfortable penciling on. There was something about that first paper he had. Mm-hmm. But by the time I was inking his stuff at Marvel, I think it was probably the blue lined house paper, I think. But then again, is that Charles that asked that question?
No,
that's another question.
Yeah.
Let's segue to Charles's question.
Okay.
Do you have formative comics reading memories? Yeah. I wanted to draw comic strips as a kid. When I was very young and was collecting stamps, I was going through trunks in my grandmother's attic and found at the bottom of one of the trunks a whole bunch of Sunday comic sections that my mother had placed there when she was a child. So here were Sunday comic sections from 1936 through 40.
Right.
And where cartoonists had a full page and nobody tried to draw like anybody else. Everybody was different and did their own thing. And I literally fell in love and wanted to do comic strips. The contemporary comic strips as a kid that really excited me I loved V.T. Hamlin's Alley-Oop. Just loved it.
Yeah.
And the straight stuff, it was Raymond's Rip Kirby, and anything that Warren Tufts did. Casey Ruggles, Lone Spaceman, and then his magnum opus Lance. I just loved that stuff. And I wanted to draw comic strips. By the time I was starting to learn something and was growing up a little bit, I realized that comic strips were dead. Any attempts at new serious continuity strips failed. The female pirate strip didn't last very long, even when they brought back Terry and the Pirates. With the brother team, and then later Dan Spiegel. People just don't cotton to continuity strips anymore. And I look at my Daily Funny section in the Medford Daily newspaper, and I wonder, well, I don't want to name names, but there's one comic strip that I just cannot stand. And I remember when the newspaper bought the strip, they printed the syndicate supplied puff piece where the guy says, I always wanted to be a cartoonist. And every day I look at that strip and I go, when is that day going to come? So I used to, when I was on staff at Disney, I hated Dilbert. Because it was so real. I lived that life. Now I find it funny because I'm not in that life anymore.
Right.
But it is so true.
You know, I want to share the screen just in case people aren't aware of what Cruisin' was. So here's a whole bunch of covers and images that I found on Google Images of the Cruisin' series.
There were 22 album covers.
Yeah.
And they told the story of Peg and Eddie.
Yes.
From the earliest meetings, their romance, their breaking up, she marrying a young man who died in Vietnam. Oh, there we go. Great. And the Cruisin' 1968 cover is when I was asked to come back and do new covers.
Oh.
We jettisoned the original 1968 cover, which was Peg and Eddie in the front seat of their van with a little kid driving home from Woodstock.
Oh.
But since we were going to extend the series, we started with a cover that was it's the one that simply says Cruisin' Years.
Oh, yeah.
That was introducing them back in the market. And now that one there where she's saying Elvis is on Ed Sullivan Tonight, that's one of the pieces, covers that's on the packaging for a group of CDs for the big box stores.
Right.
And after the last of the Cruisin', Peg and Eddie do get married. They honeymoon in Niagara Falls. In fact, it's, the Red 1969, and he's saying, I might become a partner in the law firm, and she's saying, but Eddie, I might want a career of my own or something like that. If you read the covers, there's a little bit of tension in every single last one of them. The only cover that didn't have any tension in it was the Christmas Cruisin' album, which was never released.
Oh, okay.
But I've got Eddie in a Santa Claus, and actually I drew my living room, two-story. She's coming down the stairs in the really sexy negligee.
Okay.
And he's in a Santa Claus outfit putting presents under the tree, and he's looking at me. She says, Santa, you don't want to leave without your cookies and milk. But all the rest of them, there's a little bit of tension.
Yeah.
But great. You see them coming together, then breaking up. And there's all the little things for the year. The one where he and Luther are at college, there's the newspaper clipping hanging from the lamp that announces her wedding.
Oh.
To the guy she's, it's in the drive-in theater cover where I think it's Psycho is playing. Anyway.
Yeah.
They were fun to do.
Yeah.
And after 70, I take it back. 70 is the last actual year. And that's where I've got, he's talking about, he's got to talk to Mr.
Dollarhide. Yeah.
About what happened up at Kent State. And she says, well, that's okay. Mike's going to give me another tennis lesson.
Who's Mike?
I figured I had to have my name on the last cover. Oh, another thing that talking about cruising, there have been 2 books published years ago on record album covers. One of them, they only give the art director credit. And on the other one, they give the art director and art by Mike Neuer.
Oh, hooray. Oh, well.
But I figure when I'm gone, who cares?
Yeah, well, I think
I'll still come back and gripe about it.
All right. Well, we've hit the 50-minute mark, so I think we're gonna close it up and
are we done?
We are. That was a good 50 minutes.
Oh, we never got to the scandal. Oh, well, that'll be
I know. We'll get next time. We'll get to that. Yeah. So hit subscribe and take our alerts and make sure you keep track of our video streams. We're doing this all weekend, folks.
And become a member, and we have you can text a donation if you wish as well.
Gosh, you can do so many things. You can text Kirby 103 to 44321 if you want to donate some money to us. We do have bills that we need to pay. We are an IRS approved nonprofit.
Well, the 38 people viewing this
yes
are just a tiny portion of the people whose lives have been affected by the work of Jack Kirby.
Without a doubt.
The whole Marvel Universe and the motion pictures and so on wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for Jack. So let's think about that when we see those movies. And let's think about the museum and support.
Yep. Thank you, Mike.
Yes. Thank you, Mike.
And today, and if the amount of T-shirts we sell today, we will
take care, guys.
Offer a portion to the Hero Initiative. Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Again, we'll do it again, and again. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Mike.